Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant. And today, after a little time to think it through, and with a big shout out to the greater YouTube community for being all over the announcement and launch events, I want to begin talking about Nikon's Z6 and Z7. But before I do want to let you know, if you're new to the channel, or remind you if you're not, that we've just created a Patreon page. And we invite you to join us there as a patron of the work we do here on YouTube. I'll put a link into the show notes down below, but you can always go to www.patreon.com/Hugh Brownstone for details. The bottom line is that Claudia and I have become consumed by this work. We love it, and your support to help us build it would be very welcome. Okay, now, if you want specs and hands-on first impressions reviews, there are a bunch of great coverage out there from, among others, friends and fellow YouTubers like Tony and Chelsea Northrup, Chris, Jordan, Rishi, Corey, and the rest of the team at DP Review, Gordon at Camera Labs, Toby at PhotoRec TV, Matt at mattgranger.com, though it's important to watch Matt's most recent correction video as well as his first ones because it provides a really nice narrative arc to his coverage. I'll say no more about that other than cliffhanger. Once again, I'm blown away by the YouTube community's ability to cut so quickly to the heart of the matter. It's a bit like Ask the Audience in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Which is one reason why I won't talk much about either yet. The two other reasons are that I haven't gone hands-on, and for me, what I'm most interested in is the gestalt of what we're seeing, what these cameras really mean, what they really are in a larger context. So, as the smoke begins to clear, let me just cut to the chase to say first that, again, for me, these are the two most interesting cameras from Nikon I've ever seen. I'm even including the Photonic in that. I'm excited to go hands-on with them, and I very much want Nikon to succeed. But with this said, 1, the Z6 and 7 are plainly and precisely Nikon versions of Sony's A7 III and A7R III, not very similar to or much like or reminiscent of. This is a very specific strategy bound by what I'll call, on the one hand, easy enough, a little more here, like 10-bit 422 or N-Log, though only when plugged into an external recorder, or 2 million dot 3.2-inch rear panel, or 3.7 million dot EVF, or, on the other hand, what I'll call, let's avoid cannibalizing our current lineup, or we didn't think it through, or we are more financially constrained than we'd like to be, or we absolutely had to get this out quickly as possible, a little less there, like single XQD card slot, especially when the SD Express standard promises up to 2 terabyte capacity and 985 megabyte per second transfer speeds, limited battery life, or a short recording limit in 4K, wrapped by Nikon's signature manual of arms and build quality. Hold that thought. 2, with this being the case, it's clear that while Nikon's primary objective is to stem defections by Nikon users to Sony, rather than to go after conquest sales as well, that is, take share from Sony, perhaps counterintuitively, I'll assert to you that Nikon has just opened itself up to competition from existing crop sensor cameras, most especially the Fujifilm X-H1 and Panasonic GH9 and GH5. Hold that thought. 3, which in turn means, that is, by not advancing the state of the art, that 10-bit 422 out is something like it did with its SL 3 years ago, even if it is cropped, while the GH5 can do this internally using 2 cards without a recording limit, even if it is a micro four thirds sensor. The A7R3, GH5, G9, and XH1 already have 3.7 million dot EVFs, let alone Leica's 4.4 million in the SL. Sony recently announced a 5.6 million dot EVF, and Nikon didn't take the opportunity to put a variable ND into the lens adapter. Nikon has left itself vulnerable to the next generation of Sony's, Panasonic's, and Fuji's, as well as Canon's first series full-frame mirrorless, all still unannounced but likely to change soon enough. Or maybe, just maybe, next-generation medium-format cameras, most especially whatever Hasselblad does with the X1D and Fuji does with its GFX series. 4, the hubbub over the Z-mount seems to me too self-referential and ultimately a whole lot of nothing. Yes, the introduced in 1959 F-mount was at first a boon, but backward compatibility with a half-century-old design choice did become a burden. To Nikon's credit, they've made what had to be an excruciating decision to move on. But what does it actually give them? Or, more importantly, us? How about we don't hold this thought and instead deal with it straight up? A. With an, as we now know, 55mm internal throat diameter, the Z-mount is not big enough to accommodate what we currently consider a medium format sensor. For that, it would have to be minimum 60-61mm. Thus, no clever upgrade path, no future-proofing for the new Z lenses the way Sony's FE glass is for their APS-C crop sensor users. If you ever want to go medium format, there's no inherent advantage in buying the new S-line glass now. B. There may be, most likely is, an advantage in moving to the new S-line because these are new designs which one would hope take advantage of the latest materials, software design tools, and marketplace realities and mistakes already made by others, including the need for lenses that are quiet enough and built from the ground up for hybrid autofocus video. But to the extent that you want to move to video, and these considerations are important, why would you want to keep your legacy glass other than continuing to use them for stills? Which, on the one hand, is reason enough, absolutely, but then do you invest in a new Nikon body and new Nikon glass for video when there's not much there? Or are there better options priced attractively enough with trade-offs that work for you well enough that you'd be willing to embrace a second manual of arms? C. Continuing along this track, how much more evenly illuminated, sharper, or better corrected do you need your Nikon glass to be outside of software machinations? If this is really an issue, then why does backward compatibility with your existing Nikon glass matter? And if it's not an issue, why do new lenses matter to you at all beyond what I've just mentioned? I do see, though, quite clearly the advantage of IBIS for use with those older lenses if you are happy with their image quality. And an EVF gives even stills-only photographers a number of advantages, beginning with what you see is what you get without the glare of a rear panel. D. For all the talk about how the bigger mount allows really fast lenses, other mounts, even Micro Four Thirds with, for example, the Voigtlander Noctons, already have 0.95 lenses available for them. The really big point is that all you have to do is look at the roadmap to realize, at least for the next 3 years, Nikon is not planning on leveraging that assertion. They aren't delivering any 0.95s other than the 58mm manual focus Noct, which, E, seems to me a bragging rights kind of product. Because first, the difference in depth of field between a 50mm 1.8 and a 1.0 at 3 feet is about half an inch. Second, the difference in light gain is just under 2 stops, not inconsequential, but say ISO 3200 instead of 12,800 in an era where 12,800 is absolutely usable with the latest full frame and even crop sensors down to Micro Four Thirds, though you have to ask yourself how often you'll be shooting that high in the first place. Third, the depth of field of a 58 0.95 is so shallow that in manual focus it will often be just as easy to focus by moving yourself back and forth rather than twisting the focus ring, though still just as likely to miss. That is to say, if ever IAF were important, this lens would be the poster child for it, but the Z6 and 7 don't have it. Fourth, if you do stop down to, say, f2, so that you have a fighting chance of nailing focus, why have the 0.95 in the first place? Fifth, 0.95 is going to be a stonking big piece of glass, which defeats much of the purpose of a small mirrorless camera in the first place. Sixth, you get the idea. What are we up to, 5 now? 5? The irony in all of what I've just said is that the Z6 and 7 actually make it more difficult to assert that Sony is just an electronics company or that Nikon is a much better camera company. With this announcement, Nikon has just burnished and further legitimized Sony's reputation. And with a 5-year head start, Sony full-frame mirrorless cameras have a much more complete state-of-the-art lens ecosystem than Nikon does, and will, for the next few years, at a minimum, If Sony doesn't slow down, if Nikon doesn't speed up, that 5-year gap will still close, but slowly. Put differently, the Z6 and 7 and launch lens line essentially demonstrate that Nikon is no more competent at launching a fundamentally new camera than Sony was when it launched the original A7, which is not to criticize either company, but rather an indication of how the playing field has leveled. 6. Nikon is really pronounced Nikon? That's just so distressing. Well, no, it's not. I just like the sound of Nikon a whole lot better, and it'll take me a while to adjust. Let me unburden you of the challenge of holding those earlier thoughts any longer, and then we'll wrap up. First, there is nothing wrong, and so much that is right, with applying Nikon's signature strengths to Sony or Sony equivalent electronics. The very first thing Nikon has to accomplish with these cameras is to prevent further erosion of its installed base. And to do that, they have to make the transition as easy as possible, of course. Maintaining the look, feel, and operations of the cameras with which Nikon users are already familiar is the surest path to accomplishing this. But it does beg the question, how much better are Nikon's ergos and menu system than its competitors actually? And how much does that matter to you? How much better is Nikon's weather sealing actually? How often will you need it? Second, when it comes to suddenly competing with crop sensor cameras, oh yeah, of course. If the Z6 and 7 don't have a sufficient number of native mount video optimized lenses, if they can't record 4K for more than 15 minutes, let alone unlimited, if the image quality is not significantly better, if their ergonomics are not as good, if they are priced too high, any Nikon shooter thinking of going into or going hardcore into video, or any Canon shooter faced with the same kind of choice any day now, will also have to ask himself or herself, as I alluded earlier, if it may make more sense to invest in more committed hybrid camera brands with a large head start beyond Sony, most notably Panasonic and Fuji. They've got dual card slots, they've got great IBIS, excellent ergonomics, more complete lens lines, are keenly priced. For now, let's say this. It was always going to be a daunting challenge for Nikon to move into no-holds-barred full-frame mirrorless. They could have swung for the fences, but they decided they needed to get on base first. Much as I would have liked to see them advance the state of the art, and as important as I think this is for them in the long run, I applaud Nikon for getting very serious about mirrorless, showing a pair of cameras that by all accounts thus far seem very credible, and have something to ship so soon after the announcement. Teething pains are an inevitable part of any camera launch, always have been, and I think we need to give Nikon both kudos and some breathing room. Again, I look forward to going hands-on with them. That's it. They could have done with a little less hype.
If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, join the conversation below. You guys continue to be just incredible, knowledgeable, inspiring, funny. I mean, you're a joy, truly. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Grab one or both of our new Hold That Thought t-shirts you wanted us to put up at our new 3BMEPthreadless.com store. Support our work by using our affiliate links down below in the show notes, dropping us coffee money via our PayPal link down below in the show notes, or even better than that, we invite you to become a patron of our work over at Patreon. Link down below. We've created our Patreon page because we are stoked to bring you not only gear reviews, but with our What Were You Thinking and Good World Gone Bad series, historical, educational, artistic morsels, and longer form conversations, not interviews, with world-class photographers, curators, gallery owners, keepers of the legacy, folks like Elliot Irwitt, Agnes Cyr, Mark Lubell, Etheline Staley, and friends like Brian Smith, Paul Giroux, Nino Rakicevic, and more. We'd really like you to join us to deliver this kind of content regularly. Your support on Patreon will really help us ramp it up. In which case, As always, we thank you for it. That's it. For Three Blind Men and an Elephant, I'm Hugh Brownstone. See you next time.